We've all got behaviors that are not great. Some of those behaviors or states of being are even diagnosable. ADHD, this thing and that thing. And obviously stress and strain and shifting situations and circumstances puts all of that stuff really under pressure. Now you might find your partner at the moment is behaving in a bit more of an exaggerated way in terms of the stuff that's actually really hard for you to cope with at the best of times. And your ability to cope might be a little bit lessened right now as well. If you don't like your partner being on their phone during the little bit of private time that you're able to find during the day, and all of a sudden they're like way more obsessively scrolling and catching up, and if you try and ask them not to, they're just like, but I need to know what's going on in the world and it's so bad, and oh my god, can you believe this and you can believe that. There's all kinds of things that start to come up that were annoying before and that are kind of unbearable now. So how do you dial that back and how do you establish equilibrium in that?
Yes, and again, we talk about behaviors that could be anxiety-based or depression-based behaviors that a lot of people suffer from. And we can also talk about coping mechanisms. Jamie mentioned the phone, that people will retreat to drinking and smoking and doing the sorts of things that calm themselves down. So of course, when the situation is worse, the natural behaviors will be worse and the need for the coping mechanism will be worse. So suddenly you're looking at each other thinking, whoa, you're totally crazy. You're manically depressed. You are extremely addicted. Well, no, you are what you were before, but the situation has made it such that everything is much more dialed up. And I don't know if we have a great solution for that, but I think it begins by an understanding that it's not like you married someone who is now a monster. You marry someone who has been enormously triggered, and their negative behaviors, their maybe anxiety-based behaviors or their anxiety-based coping mechanisms have really been a maximum state right now. So I think it's very important that we recognize that in each other, and we perhaps commit to creating some form of red lines so things don't get too out of hand, right? And also that we recognize that the need to deal with these things might really have to wait a little bit till after the walls come down and there's time and there's mental headspace for therapeutic intervention. But the most important thing is to not suddenly judge your partner and your marriage as if nothing's happened and they just become a monster. That's not what's happened. What's happened is that their difficult behaviors that they were coping with, and because they're not coping in general, have magnified. And it's important for us to be able to have those communications about certain basic red lines so it's manageable, but not to bring in a judgment, and certainly not to make judgments as to whether your marriage is valid based on very accentuated behaviors because of the situation.
But I would say on the flip side of that, it's also appropriate to point out that if people are starting to really go off the rails, if they're really exhibiting truly addicted behavior to alcohol, to drugs, violent behavior, just really flying off the handle, in the same way that I think it's really important to remember that this is not always going to be like this. This is caused by stress, and therefore you could advocate for, say, a pause and wait. At the same time, if you're seeing red lines crossed and you're seeing behavior that you consider as really dangerous or damaging, then maybe you need to put your foot on the accelerator a little bit and seek proper medical help or addiction counseling. It's a difficult balance to get this stuff right, but pressured circumstances, things like the volcano erupts in different ways. So whether it's seeking professional help for a behavior that you never really needed to before, or adding some patience and some time because you understand that it's just like a little bit off right now, each one of those is going to be valid in the right circumstances, but none of this necessarily reflects on the viability of the relationship in fundamental terms.